during. So I'm just going to kind of roll with stuff, pausing, hopefully engaging. Hopefully you all are engaged with what I talk about. So thank you for having me here. Like, I'm really honored to speak with you all today. I'm Alan, and I love civic engagement. So if this was happening in person, you'd be able to tell that I'm wearing jeans and boots, and I'm most likely found wearing a cowboy hat. But it's because I'm really engaged with the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Some people might call it an addiction. I currently serve on about 8 committees with some sort of leadership role on most of them. In addition to that, I'm also part of the City of Houston's Clean City Commission. I serve on the board of directors for the Memorial Management District, Planted Forward Farms, Keep Houston Beautiful. I'm on the Next Gen Leadership Committee for the Holocaust Museum. Oh yeah, I also volunteer for the American Red Cross, the Hay Center for Foster Youth, the A-Leaf Super Neighborhood Council, and I'm on the advisory council for KD, University of Houston Victoria's Business School, and Volunteer Houston. The question I get asked most frequently is, do I have a job? Like, I do all this other stuff. How do I have time for that if I have a job and if I'm working? And the simple answer to that is yes, I do. So I'm the president and CEO of the West Houston Association, where I work with industry and government leaders through collaboration, education, and advocacy to improve the quality of life experience and opportunity for the 2 million plus people who live, work, and play in the 1,000 square mile greater West Houston region. And you can kind of get a look at what I mean when I say greater West Houston when you look at that picture on the map. So I'm not here to brag about what I do. What I'm here to talk about is how I'm able to find the time, the resources, and the energy to do all this stuff. And I hope some of what I say resonates with you and helps you get more engaged with your community. So I've always liked this quote from JFK's inaugural address, right? Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. You've probably heard this, you're familiar with it. And in my first draft of this presentation, when I was first asked to talk on this kind of topic, I went into this whole theoretical discussion about this phrase and its meaning. And, my background as a political scientist and how I wanted to dissect this and break it apart. But then what I realized is what I really want to talk about is much simpler. And while it's inspired by these words, it's actually a little bit different from these words. Instead, I want to think about ask what you can do for your community and how those actions can complement your life. So you may see this immediately as JFK's quote in reverse, but it's not. Instead, think of it this way. How can what you're doing for your community be of value to you? How can you gain value by being civically engaged? Because being civically engaged doesn't mean you're some sort of altruist in a vacuum, really. And what John Oliver points out is, right, we can do great things, and these great things can be good for us, and it can be good for other people at the same time. And it's really about that synergy and making those connections where we can really gain value from doing this, and a way where the work we put into it comes back in spades towards us. So I'm really here to suggest that it's all about identifying ways that participation in your community can complement your lifestyle, kind of doing good while you're doing your thing. And so what I want to do is kind of walk you through a little bit about how that it's done. So first, as I said, this is kind of a workshop. I don't want to just lecture, even though I do have that background. So take out a piece of paper, hold it this way. And then you're going to divide it into 4 sections. So kind of as you see on the screen. So one section will be kind of occupations, another one will be interests, values, and purpose. And then for anyone who doesn't have an occupation yet, you can either put school if you're a student, or of course, you may have one. When I was in school, I worked at a movie theater. So, you may have some sort of job in addition to what you do now. So you should have something that kind of looks a little bit like this with the 4 different sections on the top of your piece of paper. And as we move forward, we'll kind of talk about how these different things relate and how it relates to civic engagement. So first, we're going to talk about your interests. So with this part about interests, what I want you to do is think about what is it that you like to do. Just take a moment and just write some things down, whatever it might be. What do you enjoy doing? And as you're thinking through that of what do you enjoy doing, it might help to think about how do you spend your free time? So hopefully you've put down something, a few things, and don't feel like it has to be this amazing civic experience in regards to your interest. It could simply be that you're interested in science fiction, you like Star Wars maybe, or you're really interested in sports, or you like to read. It's how you spend your free time. And then what I would say is, as you're writing those down, think about if you're aware of any organizations that maybe align with those interests. It's okay if you don't, but if you can think of some, maybe scribble those down as well. All right, so once you feel you kind of have some of your interests down, we'll move on to your values. What do you care deeply about? What kind of gives your life meaning? So for me, some of the things that I really value is kind of being engaged with the community. But it doesn't have to be related to that. It could be different, right? You may really value education, for example. You may really value your own professional development or personal growth. So again, as you're creating this list of your values, the things that are important to you, the things you care deeply about, are there any organizations that you may be aware of that share your values? And if you don't know, that's okay. But if you know some, again, it's a great chance to put that down too. Then moving on to the third column, your purpose. So your purpose is a greater sense of how do you want to spend your time, or what do I want to get out of my efforts? Or as some people might say, what do you want to be remembered for when you die? You want to take it in that kind of grim way. So when we put those things together, ideally, you're going to have something that looks maybe a little bit like this. So I've kept this pretty simple with just some interest, values, and purpose. And this example comes from my buddy John. We were talking and I had him do this exercise. And then when we started with interests, initially he said to me, music and food. And so I asked him to expand on that. So as you're thinking about your own interests, maybe you need to kind of expand on it or write some pieces out. But you can obviously start with simple things like music, food, video games, Star Wars, costumes. This is what was on his list. And then on his values, he said he's really interested in learning. He likes being efficient. He likes the idea of highlighting other people, like recognizing people for what they do, personal development. And then his purpose, he says he wants to make a difference in the lives of others. He wants to improve his community. These are some of his purposes, what he wants to get out of life or what he wants to be known for. So when he threw out music and food, I'm pretty sure he thought he was throwing something out there that there's no way we can make connections with. But I told him when he threw that out there that, hey, I'm actually going to judge a charity barbecue contest this weekend. So if you want to come with, you can eat for a cause. His mind was blown. He's like, what do you mean I can eat for a cause? So I was like, yeah, for sure, right? They need people to judge this. This is a charity event. This is a fundraiser. And they need people that are willing to do this. They also need people who are willing to cook for this kind of event. And so there were options immediately that for him were kind of mind-boggling. Like, how could I use food as a way to be engaged with the community or involved or to give back to anyone? So from there, I took his interest in music. And I knew he lived in Katy. So I looked online for some arts nonprofits, just kind of Googled those terms, arts nonprofits in Katy. And I ran across one called Art Teach, who do things like teach music to, at-risk youth. So now we had an opportunity to combine his interest in music with the value of learning and using that to make a difference in people's lives. So here you can see how these things start to come together, how his interests and his values connect with his purpose, all in regards to civic engagement. So he now had two ways that he had never thought about. One, he could go eat barbecue and be doing that for a cause. And two, he could take his love for music, specifically he's a drummer, and he figured out he could teach kids how to drum. And he was really excited about that. He's like, wow, it actually sounds like something really fun to do. I kind of want to do it. And he reached out to the organization, and he made that happen just by having that really short thing of, oh, I like music, I care about learning, and I want to make a difference in other people's lives. But that was just one example, right? Or two, I guess, food and music. But just using this list, I want to show you some other examples. And it's not that you have to do all these things, but these are all the opportunities that are kind of out there for you. Right? So with John's list, he's also a big Star Wars fan, as I mentioned. And he has this interest in costuming. And so he became part of a charity group that dresses up in Star Wars costumes to visit kids in the children's hospital, right? Like, who would have even thought that that's a thing where you could take Star Wars and again, do something like that and have this kind of effect. From there, he also does another thing, right? He likes podcasts. So when he creates podcasts, and in doing that, originally this started as his wife had kind of a side business of making podcasts. I think it was food related. But what he decided to do was he wanted to start making podcasts that highlight other people. And the other people he decided to highlight with his podcast are those other people who are part of the Star Wars costuming group. So now you're talking about a really niche, small item, right? So this is a podcast about people who like Star Wars and costuming, who volunteer their time to do that. It's kind of like a meta, event for him here. And what he's able to do that with this is his experience gets him some personal development, because he's getting better at creating podcasts, which he's helping his wife in regards to a side hustle business. Also, it's making him think about maybe a career in audio production, which he hadn't even thought about a year ago. Also, he uses the podcast to focus on interviews with these people about what makes them unique. And a lot of times this has kind of a direct benefit for that person, but then also for his audience. He's getting out word about this kind of Star Wars costuming organization, and also about these people that are really making a difference in their communities. So again, all of these little ideas are coming out of this. Well, usually when people start putting this together, putting your interest down isn't the challenge, right? You know what you're interested in, you know what you care about. Values aren't too challenging either. Sometimes the word is a little weird, we're not sure what it means. And purpose, a little broad. But the biggest challenge tends to be, okay, Alan, so now I know my interests, I know my values, but how do I find opportunity? How do I put these things together to actually identify those organizations that I mentioned before? So what I want to bring to light is an organization called Volunteer Houston. So Volunteer Houston is a great web portal, and there's other products like this out there. There's other organizations out there, but Volunteer Houston obviously is the Houston one. So why not talk about that? And you can go to this website, or you can go to their website and create your own profile. And when you do so, on their website, you can see, this is what it looks like. I just opened up my profile and took a screenshot so you kind of see what it looks like. You have a way to sort all the different opportunities out there that they have listed based on things like what agency it is. Is it related to, hopefully you can see my cursor, to food insecurity? Is it related to the winter storm? Is it related to COVID? Also, they have these little icons, and these icons have meaning, right? So this is an arts and culture opportunity as opposed to a healthcare opportunity. So through here, while it's not every possible organization in Houston, they have over 100 organizations that are working with them, and they continue to grow and have more and more. So here, it's kind of not the perfect thing. It doesn't have every opportunity out there, but it's a great place to start. And it's a free resource that you can use. Also, when you're in the system, especially if you're thinking about how do I track my hours, the system does it for you. So if you're in any kind of position right now where you need to be tracking volunteer hours, the Volunteer Houston website can also do that. So that's my pitch for them since I'm on their advisory committee. If we want to get a little bit more advanced with this, and I'm not going to go into too many details here, the next step would be how do you connect it to your occupation, right? So this is where you can kind of maximize your efficiency. And you can also really connect your job, what you spend a third of your day doing or a third of your life doing, with everything else. How do you connect it with your interest? How do you connect it with this engagement opportunity? And the three ways that really exist to do it, one are kind of through organizations, professional organizations in your field, right? So perhaps if you're in engineering, there's engineering associations. If you're in psychology, there's psychology associations. If you're in school, there's clubs, right? There's always, or there's things related to your major. If you're in college, if you're in high school, there's things related to potential career paths. There's these professional organizations. And these organizations allow you to get kind of professional development for yourself while also creating opportunities for others, right? So whether you're creating events for people to attend, whether you're attending the events, that kind of synergy is where you get professional and personal growth, but you're also able to give back to the community at the same time. The second way are the organizations that are kind of tangential to your own, right? So what are the places that provide a mutual benefit kind of to your career or to your job, as well as to an organization? So where you can use your volunteer time or the time that you're not getting paid to gain work skills and do something that both maybe furthers the mission of your organization and furthers the mission of maybe a civic priority. So I'm going to use a really wild card thing here, which is one of my first jobs was working at a comic book store. Well, what about literacy? Literacy in comic books is a really important connection that people are starting to make, and understanding that like graphic novels can be really good tools to enhance literacy, even though they're also thought of as an entertainment source or something fun to do. So that kind of connection, or so the comic shop had a relationship with like a school reading program, or you could create such a program if it didn't already exist. And that's how you start to bridge that interest, the career, and that civic engagement together. And then the third way in regards to occupation is, what are those organizations your company or your employer already supports? So if you are at some big company, there's probably a corporate social responsibility office, and they've identified certain organizations they want to work with. If you're at a small business or you're in school, there's probably organizations that have already been identified that your school or your organization works with. And it could be anything from the clubs in the school that host blood drives with a Gulf Coast Community Blood Center or American Red Cross, to maybe working at a food pantry. And the value here is sometimes these are opportunities where the work you're doing actually benefits the company, and it's something you can kind of do on company time. So it's a way to blend in those three opportunities again, and how you find time for more stuff. So to give you kind of an example, this is someone I know who is an engineer. And so it shows you kind of, here's their interests, very different from John's interests, values, purpose. So you can see how this person has different interests, different values, different purpose. And what we identified here in regards to occupation were how we talked about. So American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, is that kind of professional organization. Urban Land Institute, again, is a tangential and professional organization. West Houston Association, where I'm at, another tangential, versus Gulf Coast Regional Blood Centers was one where it's something the employer already worked with. So this person works for an engineering firm called EHRA. I don't think there's any secret there to say where they work. And these are different connections and occupationally they have. And again, you can see their personal interests, their values, and their purpose. And so you start to say, how do you make connections? So I'm going to jump on this one a little bit and show you some connections here. So taking kind of their values and their interests, so hiking, camping, sustainability, the spirit of adventure and environmentalism that they value, spending time with their friends and family being important to them. Well, they wrapped all this together. And what they do is they volunteer with the Girl Scouts. So this is where they get to spend time with their kids and with their family, but also get to do good and get to embrace those interests of things like camping and sustainability and environmentalism. It's a way to put all these different pieces together. Another kind of smaller connection that the same person does is they have a strong interest in animals. They care a lot about animals. They want to improve the lives of animals. It's something that they're like passionate about. And so she fosters dogs, right? Another kind of connection between interests and purpose. Then you start to bring in things like occupation. Well, she cares a lot about doing good work at her job, right? Very conscientious, high commitment. And so through working with the American Society of Civil Engineers, she gets professional development, but she also organizes meetings for other people to get professional development. That's kind of what I mentioned before with that concept. Similarly, she works with my organization, the West Houston Association, where she's part of a Rising Leaders program, right? Where it's a program to both accelerate her own knowledge and growth, but then also to give back to others who want to learn more about what's happening in West Houston and what our organization does. And then I kind of threw some other stuff here about Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure is another organization she belongs to. It connects to her personal interests in sustainability, but then she also got a certificate through that organization that related back to her job and doing good work at her job. Sustainability, yeah, so she's also on the sustainability committee for the West Houston Association. So just to give you a sample, because I feel like it's not fair if I don't talk about myself as well. So this is my list. This is a list from about 2-3 years ago, back when I used to work at Rice University. I created this list. I did that so I can show you kind of a progression over time. I'm not going to go through all the details of my list. It will take way too long. Instead, I'm just going to show you what happens when you start making one click, right? These are all the things I started to throw together in my own personal life, right? So I looked at some of my interests and made connections with it. So you have things like, I'm really interested in rodeo volunteering. So rodeo and volunteering, and how did I connect that to other things? So what I did was I actually connected it down here to my job, and I taught a class on the rodeo when I worked at Rice University. I taught a writing class about rodeo. And so it was a way to connect those kinds of pieces. As you'll notice, my thing kind of goes crazy, it goes everywhere. Rodeo also relates to making a difference in people's lives because of the scholarship program. So volunteering, knowing I'm making that difference. And if you want, I can sit and dissect all this, but I'd rather not. I'd rather give you all time to work on your stuff and to talk through some of your interests and where y'all are going. But what I do want to show you is how, if this is 2018, you can say, okay, 2019, and it just keeps growing, right? As you start this process, this isn't like you do it once and you're done, because over time, your interests might change, your job might change. Your values and purpose will probably stay pretty similar throughout your life, and they may tweak a little bit, but your opportunities will also change, right? The different events and organizations you learn about. And so over time, I participated in this program called Leadership Houston. It allowed me to learn more about Houston politics. It allowed me to improve my community through some of the programming that they had. It also introduced me to people that benefited me in my job. It gave me leadership skills. And then through that, I ended up volunteering with the Hay Center, which you can kind of see on the far right, and it connected to some other pieces. So it's like, as you kind of go through this process, you're going to find more and more opportunity. And at a certain point, you'll have to decide which of these things am I going to cut out of my life in order to focus on things that you care more about. But I think the first step for a lot of people is just identifying those opportunities and figuring out where to kind of get started. So I really want to spend time here like on your lists, like taking your lists, and let's draw some connections between your lists. So I'm going to stop screen sharing, and hopefully we can kind of just talk through it or have a discussion.
So I did get a few questions, or would you like me to wait till later for the question?
Go for it.
One of the questions was about, I guess just like what's tangible, because I know for some high school students that I deal with, as well as some of the college students that I've worked with, that sounds really great, but sometimes it can be very confusing. It's like, where do I start? Because it's kind of the dilemma of having so many options and so many things in this culture. So it's like, what tangibly can they like start or step? And do you, the way that you showed us the interest, the values, do they have to do it in that order?
No, not at all. It definitely doesn't have to be in that order. When I talk to different people, I start in different spaces.
Mhm.
I started with interests here because I think for younger people, it's much easier to think about their interests. I can be wrong. I just feel like that's usually the easy thing, especially when you're working with people who are younger. Because when you say things like values or purpose, it may be too grand of something to think about, but it is pretty easy to think about, how do I want to spend my free time? And even if it's as simple as, I like riding my bike. And then you can run from, oh, cool, you're interested in riding your bike. What does that mean? What are the opportunities in regards to that? How can I take that one simple thing or that one interest and grow from there?
Okay. Um, and then what would be the connection from taking, um, turning your interest or purpose into like your occupation? Like, how do you make, what was that transition like for you to take some of those interests? Or did you already have the occupation and then those interests kind of changed because you were able to see what it was like working in specific jobs?
No, so for me, it's definitely, I didn't follow a linear career path, and I probably never will in my life. It's just, I guess, not how I operate. When I was 13, I wanted to be an astronaut, but then I realized at the time I was too tall. So then I was going to be an aerospace engineer, and I'd just be so awesome. They'd have to send me to space. If you've seen Big Bang Theory, they stole my whole life story right there. But instead, over time, my interest changed, right? When I was in college, was during 9/11. It made me really interested in psychology, terrorism, world affairs, what was going on in kind of the world around me. It kind of took me from the stars and I guess maybe grounded me a little bit in that sense. Very interested in things like defense policy. And then over time, I got interested in politics, ended up getting a PhD in political science. So again, it kind of moves me a different place. But I've always been a volunteer throughout my life. And for me, it started not based on my own personal interest, but the opportunity that was in front of me. So when I was a kid, my mom worked in a nursing home. So my first opportunity to volunteer was at a nursing home. And as a young kid, volunteering in a nursing home, my job was things like delivering, goodie baskets to residents at a nursing home. Which, as a kid, I just walk around and hand people things. Like that's easy. It's great. It got me into stuff. As I got older, still in that environment, it became more administrative tasks, right? Like I would make copies, or I'd be like a little assistant. And we're talking like elementary, middle school here. Like when I first kind of got involved with these things. And over time, it became more about my interests and what I was interested in. And so as I got older, it was like, oh, I'm really interested in dinosaurs. And so I ended up like volunteering at the Science Museum. Again, that interest in space was always still there. So volunteering again at the Science Museum and getting those kind of opportunities. So for me, it's always been more about chasing my interests and kind of going places and then just seeing what opportunities open up themselves. In regards to the part of your question about how do you kind of work it into your job, I think it's been less direct and more indirect. It's been more about what are some of those interests that I like, and maybe how can I spend my day getting paid to do things I enjoy doing? Because when I was younger, my parents would say, it's called work, you're not supposed to enjoy it. And I hated that. Like, I don't want to believe that. You spend too much time working to not enjoy it. And work should be fun. And what you do should be something that interests you and that you're passionate about, and you care about. And I would just kind of really encourage, especially younger people, to think about what is it that you're interested in, what are you passionate about? And I think you can make money doing almost anything. It's just a matter of having someone there to maybe help you think through how to make that possible.
Thank you. Did anyone else have any questions or comments after kind of writing your own values, interests on your paper?
Hello, Alan. How are you doing?
Good. How you, Loretta?
Good. This is good. Thank you so much for this information. I sat here as a nonprofit leader as well as a mother of two dudes. So our 13-year-old is really interested in politics.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously interested in politics. He speaks Mandarin and he loves CNN. He loves being able to dissect conversation with his dad. He's on the debate team in school. And so one of the things that you just said resonated with me is, how do I want to spend my time? He's always talking about, I don't want to spend my time just doing what I just want to have my time to do what I really like to do. So this exercise is going to be very good for him. But let me ask you this. How would you encourage students on the nonprofit side? How would you encourage students who are predominantly girls who may have never have tapped into STEM, but they just see science and technology as something far off? And we're really trying to show them how science and technology, engineering, math is really not, they're not courses, but they're the way of life. So how would you gauge a conversation with getting maybe third through fifth graders involved in how to write their value of them being future rising leaders in STEM?
I have lots of thoughts. I'm trying to think how to put it in a coherent answer. The first thing that comes to my mind as soon as you started that conversation was about having kind of good, I think, models for them to follow. So I think about some of the people in my kind of world that I work with, and I know some just amazing female engineers, right? And I'm just like,
Right.
why wouldn't you be an engineer and be interested in STEM and be a woman? Like, who cares? Like, it's great.
Right.
And I think part of it is showing that success, right? Like being able to show young people and say like, look, and having them talk about their passions, right? Rather than me trying to talk for them. I feel like I can't know for sure like what's in their minds. I just know that there are so many like successful female STEM employed people out there that it's clearly a career path that works and does well. But I think that maybe the secret would be to bring some of them in, right?
Mhm.
Personally, for me, I think the inspirational stuff is when you bring in someone like an astronaut, right? But again, I'm a space nerd. So having someone, who can talk about that to me is really cool. But on the flip side, I think it's connecting it to what it is they do care about. And I don't know the answer, so I'm gonna ask that for you, Loretta. What is it that these third to fifth graders care about? Like, what are they interested in? And then maybe I can connect that to them.
And you know what? I'm glad that you said that because we're actually preparing for our summer camp. This will be the first time we have it for third through fifth. We normally work with girls middle and high school. And so this is a new space for us, but we're willing because of the opportunity that we have to connect with girls early. And we always bring in lead hers. We call them our lead hers, and we give them experience of those who are not just leaders in STEM, but actually thriving and making a difference and do community work. So we wanted to show the total picture. It's similar to what you're saying is, I've built a career, I've done well in my career, but now how do I give back to my community that helped me be able to pretty much rise up in this career? And so I think I'm going to include that exercise in the camp with them because we're focusing on drones, robots, and coding this summer. And so we'll have an exercise for them to talk about, well, what are their interests, and what are they passionate about? Like if they weren't in this camp, what would they be doing in the summer, right? What would they be doing? And what do they like to do just for fun? And that probably will lead to some other discussions. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I love the lead hers name. I think that's cool.
Yes.
And let me know if you need any help identifying
Okay.
people. I'm happy to try to do that.
Wonderful. So how can I stay connected to you, Alan?
So you can hit me up by email at alan@westhouston.org. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Either way.
Right. And I'm sure you won't forget the organization, Supergirls Shine Foundation.
Supergirl.
It just makes you smile when you say it.
It does.
Thank you. I've got to run to another commitment, but this has been good. Thank you, Felicia, for this invitation.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Loretta.
You're welcome.
I think that one of the last couple of questions that I received was someone asked, would this, your PowerPoint, would you be able to share that with anyone who wanted to receive it just so that they can take it on for themselves of just walking through the different steps?
For sure. I'm happy to share it.
Okay, thank you. Could you send that to me and then I'll just share it with anyone who we come across?
I can. The only thing I'll say is, I don't have the rights to use any of these images, so use
Okay.
at your own risk.
Okay, yeah, so please just keep it for personal, reflection if you are looking for it. This, again, we don't own the rights. He doesn't own the rights to the picture, so please don't just massively post it somewhere, but just use it for your personal reflection. Are there any more, I guess, questions for Dr. Steinberg? Okay, well, I guess, my phone. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Steinberg. As I said before, you know, sometimes we have people who ask a lot of questions and other times not, but we do appreciate, I think that's given the students and the teachers just things to think about and also take with them as they're going on. So I truly appreciate you for your time. Again, it's always a pleasure to have you with the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston join us. And we just look forward to continuing our partnership with you. And so just thank you.
For sure. Happy to be here, and I hope it was useful.
Thank you. It was. Again, so just letting everyone know, we do have a program coming up, so you can go to wachhouston.org for any upcoming programs you'd like to register for. Also, we do have our applications open for our Global Scholars Academy. So again, you can go to our wachhouston.org to sign up, find out more information about it, and it's for middle schoolers and high schoolers. So thank you all so much for being with us, and I hope that you have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate your presentation. I might